Good evening, and welcome to Copperfield's Books virtual event with Jennie Lee. My name is Jamie Madsen, and I'm the Marketing and Events Coordinator here at Copperfield's Books, and I'll also be your host for the evening. Copperfield's Books has been committed to literature, education, and creating community together since our founding in 1981. All 9 of our stores are currently open for inside service and curbside pickup every day from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. As COVID-19 continues to endanger the future of indie bookstores like us, I just wanted to take a moment and thank you all for your continued support, both in-store and online. I know this has been an extremely tough year for everyone, but the support of locals like you allows us to continue providing these events, and for that, we are so very grateful, so thank you. A couple of housekeeping items before I introduce tonight's author. We will be using the chat box to provide links to view upcoming Copperfield's events, links to pre-order Jennie's new title, a 10% discount code for use on our website with her new title, links to purchase her previous books, and will also include my contact details for post-event follow-up. Additionally, the Q&A box tonight will be your go-to with any questions or comments for the speaker. The format will feature between 30 to 45 minutes of in conversation between myself and Jennie, and we will be followed by a live Q&A. As always, we will try to get to as many of your questions as we can. And if you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see an icon that says Q&A. Please submit your questions here rather than replying to my posts in the chat box. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce tonight's author, Jennie Lee. Jennie is the multi-award-winning author of True Yoga, practicing with the Yoga Sutras for happiness and spiritual fulfillment, and Breathing Love, meditation in action. She is a recognized expert in the fields of yoga therapy and spiritual living. As a certified yoga therapist, she has taught classical yoga and meditation for more than 20 years and also coached private clients in the practices that integrate life spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Her writing is featured regularly in the national magazines such as Light of Consciousness and Yoga Therapy Today, as well as online with Yogapedia, Yoga Digest, Mind Body Green, and many more. She also writes inspirational screenplays and facilitates international wellness retreats. Jennie is here with us tonight to discuss her brand new book, Spark Change, 108 Provocative Questions for Spiritual Evolution. I'm so excited to have you here with us tonight, especially since this book doesn't even pub until this upcoming Tuesday. We're so very lucky to get this opportunity, and I'm so pleased to hand it over to you, Jennie. Why don't you take it away before I come back for questions?
Well, thanks so much, Jamie. I'm really happy to be here, and I want to thank anybody who's on the call too, just for supporting the independent bookstores. They really are so important to all of us authors and to you guys. It's just a really special thing. And I know everybody's having a challenging time right now. So I'm greeting you from the island of Oahu, where I live, and it's really fun to be able to connect with people in different parts of the country this way. It's one of the benefits to Zoom, and so, excuse me, I feel like I'm going to sneeze. Oh my goodness. Okay, maybe it passed. Maybe it passed. But I'm also just super excited to talk to you tonight about Spark Change. This book has been about 2.5 years in the making. When we came up with the title, I loved it immediately. I had no idea though that we would be in a pandemic and that it would be launching at this time, a very particular time of history. And I couldn't be more grateful for the fact that it's coming out now and providing a tool, hopefully, for people who are in all different kinds of transitions to get some inspiration and some guidance as to how to navigate those. And so I really hope to hear from you in the questions later, or the chat, or however that's being managed, because I love questions, of course, since I wrote a book about questions. And so I really would love to hear your questions and be able to tell you specifically how this book might help with some transitions that you're in, or, you know, things that you're going through. But I will say that the reason that I wrote this book and kind of the way that it came about was because I've been a yoga therapist for the past 20 years. And some people might not know what that is, but it holds many different facets. But my particular take on yoga therapy is particularly helping people who are in transition. So oftentimes clients come to me who might be going through a job change, reevaluating their careers. Maybe they've had a relationship loss or are grieving some other form of loss, and looking at kind of how to get clarity on next steps in life. And, you know, that often brings up a lot of anxiety for people. It can also bring up depression. So many times I'm working with people who are struggling in those ways. They're dealing with stress and grief and all manner of emotional content as well. So the yoga therapy that I offer is not just a physical practice of yoga by any means. It's very much looking at the mind strategies within yoga philosophy, and how we get clarity in life. And so that's a big part of what this book is about. So when I'm working with clients, and the way it ties into Spark Change, the book, is that I really have found such value in asking questions. And people who are not feeling completely clear about their next steps in life almost don't know how to ask themselves the questions that will take them to the clarity. So my job as a coach, and certainly what I'm presenting in this book, the 108 provocative questions, is a way to help someone think differently than they've been thinking about something that they're going through. It's a way to be introspective and gain clarity. And so I love just the process of guiding people through a series of questions and feeling that aha moment that often comes when someone starts to think differently than they have been thinking before. So what I recommend in using this book is that you take time, you carve out time, and really make it a practice. So within the yoga tradition, there is a practice called swadhyaya, and that's a fancy Sanskrit word for self-reflection or introspection. And the reason this practice is so important is because it takes our attention away from kind of the outer world, and where we're constantly in reaction to what's happening around us or who is around us. And it brings us back home to ourselves and to our inner wisdom and to our truth. And if we're not making that a practice on a regular basis, then it's really easy to get kind of off course in terms of what we are wanting for our life, what we feel most aligned with, most purposeful with. And so I feel that the practice of introspection is something that can be undertaken by anyone, and is really, really important for all of us to find that path of greatest, highest purpose and joy in our lives. So I am happy to share some from the book. I had one question that I had pulled out already, but maybe I'll just see if Jamie had any questions for me to give more introduction around myself or the book before we dig in there.
Yes, I would love to. Okay, before you get into it, lots of questions, and my mind is kind of dispersed. So tell us why you think people are so afraid to change.
And I go into this in the very first chapter of the book. So the first chapter of the book is on change itself. And it sets up the whole process that I'm going to take you through in the book. And it really talks about why people are afraid to change, because human beings really are. We're kind of wired for homeostasis. We like things to stay the way they are. And of course, as everyone's experiencing right now, change is uncomfortable. Uncertainty is uncomfortable. Not knowing what the future holds is uncomfortable. It makes us feel really out of sorts, anxious, afraid. And so we avoid it, and we tend to kind of stay in the places, and oftentimes, places that, and when I say places, I might mean relationships or jobs or whatever, that aren't necessarily totally satisfying, but to think about making a change feels so monumental or so challenging that we just would rather kind of stay the way things are. And so handling that fear is something I definitely work with in many of the questions in the book, and kind of how to get beyond that.
And I should have stepped back for a second. I'm very curious into how this book came to you. Was it in the middle of a change? Was it, kind of aligned with anything you were going personally, or how did this book come about?
Well, I personally have gone through huge changes in my life. I mean, I've gone through, I think, 3 or 4 cross-country moves, like completely uprooted my life and started over in new places. The most recent one coming here to Hawaii. I left a 10-year stint on the East Coast. I owned a yoga studio and
Wow.
built a whole community there, and then uprooted myself and my son at the time, who was young, moved to Hawaii and completely started over again. And people said, "What are you doing?" but they said it in a good way, kind of like, I actually had many people say to me, "I don't think I could make such a big change."
It's bold. Yeah.
It's bold, and it does take a lot of courage. And I talk about courage in the book too. But as I was saying, beyond having made a lot of big personal changes in my own life, the working with people in my yoga therapy practice, walking people through the process of change, is also a big part of where this book came from. And over time, learning what questions really do help people kind of dig into that deeper wisdom that lives within them. Because I feel like we all have that inner knowing of what's right for us, but sometimes we just need a little help tapping it.
That's amazing, actually. And kind of, you brought up my next question. Working with people and helping them get through these changes, what do you think is the most important factor for someone who's successfully looking to spark change in their life?
I mean, the thing that's going to bring someone through change in a positive way and keep them out of anxiety is knowing that it's going to be a bit of work. Any change, it takes a bit of work. Nothing good happens really in our lives without some dedication.
Right.
We don't learn a new skill or anything else overnight. So it's a process. And so we need to be patient with ourselves. We need to be patient, and we need to be accepting of the various emotions that arise as we're going through change. We need to be compassionate with that process and not judge ourselves, in how it's going. So those qualities are going to help someone. Courage, just really practicing courage. Courage is moving forward even if you're afraid. And we build that courage and we build the strength to make big changes just by doing it. The fact of the matter is there's no secret to this formula other than we just have to do it and do it again, and baby steps. So whenever we're trying to make a change or break a habit, it's about taking baby steps on a regular basis, building that almost like a discipline or a practice. And in that way, we gain more self-trust and we gain more courage, we gain more willpower. And these are the qualities that are going to take someone through any kind of change in their life.
And so kind of on that line, and for someone like me who's a little indecisive sometimes, what would someone do who might be unhappy or might look to be bettering their life in some way if they know they need to change, but they don't necessarily know where to start?
Yeah. Well, a big part of the assessing what the discontent is this kind of introspection and being able to ask yourself questions to identify really what it is. And there's one question in the book, I can't quote the number, but it's if I'm experiencing resistance in any way, resistance to something in my life, what is that resistance telling me? Or what is underneath that resistance? Is there a deeper need beneath the resistance that's not being met? Is there something else that I'm not looking at that's kind of feeding into it? I could find that question if you'd like me to. It's an interesting one to explore, actually, because just getting super clear on what it is that needs changing sometimes is a multi-layer process. It's not always that kind of first thing.
Right. No, that's really fascinating, and it'll definitely be a portion of the book that I myself will be diving a little deeper into. Okay, kind of next question for me. What keeps people from making the changes that, they've now discovered that they need to make?
Well, often it's because there is probably going to be some sacrifice in making a change. And this is something that I've looked at a lot for myself as I've gone through big changes. And it's like, well, you can look at it this way. There's a sacrifice also to staying where you are, to staying stuck. Right. There's a big sacrifice.
Right.
It's actually a big sacrifice to your spirit. And one of the questions in the book actually is, how do you need to call your spirit back? So again, the subtitle of this book is 108 Provocative Questions for Spiritual Evolution. And I always like to kind of talk about that because this is really about recognizing our soul path and embodying our soul's purpose. And so if we're not being brave in moving forward in life according to what our spirit is here to manifest in this lifetime, we're not going to be happy. And so calling that spirit back, figuring out in what way you've abandoned yourself, and looking at what it is that your soul is really wanting to bring into manifestation right now. It takes a lot of courage, and sometimes it takes some sacrifice, but the sacrifice on the other side, to answer your question, is way worse in my opinion, because then we just sort of die a little bit inside every day, and that's sad, and that's not good, and that doesn't bring people to any kind of happiness.
Right. Gosh, that was such a beautiful description of what the purpose of this book is. That was just fantastic. So you spoke a little bit about self-reflection as being part of this practice. Can you tell us a little bit more about how they're related?
Related to change?
The spiritual reflection part of these practice of change, yes.
Yeah. Well, I think that meditation or moving into inner stillness is so important in order to hear that spirit, the spirit within you that has a purpose. I mean, I just believe everybody who is here has a unique purpose that we've come to manifest in this life. And if we're not taking time each day in meditation or just in quiet contemplation, even, it could be journaling for you, or it could be walking in nature, or some place where you've turned off the distractions, you've kind of unplugged from other conversations, and you're just having that time with yourself where you're listening to that inner guidance. And that's what puts us back in touch with what our highest truth is, what our highest values are, what our spirit is calling for, and we can, again, sort of feel this low-lying depression or low-lying discontent. And often that is a pointer that you've been ignoring your soul for a while. And so I would say, that's exactly the kind of time to pick up a book like Spark Change and dig into some of these questions, because they're definitely going to make you think differently than you've been thinking about things. Should I just pick one randomly? I love picking them randomly.
I'd love that.
I have found in my conversations with people, I'll say that that this is not a book to read necessarily cover to cover. Although it does follow a particular process of change, and you could do that. You could also, and I have found great benefit with people, of just intuitively opening it, and or thinking of a number that's significant to you, like maybe it's your day of birth, and then looking that number up. Or my husband woke up the other morning, he had dreamed a number, and so I'm like, well, go look at Spark Change.
Yeah, right.
It just happened to be, the very right question for him on that day. So I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna open the book. We'll see what we land on. So this will be hopefully something good for someone who's listening to the call.
Yeah.
Let's see what we hit. So there's one question per page, and my eye fell on question number 35, which is, am I willing to have what I say I want? Well, that's a bit of a tricky one.
Huh.
Am I willing to have what I say I want? So why don't I read the description that I give?
Yes.
Because every question has a little bit of guidance for the reader. So I don't just like drop the question and walk away.
Great. That's helpful.
Okay, so as we attempt to change stagnant areas of our lives, we may notice that we are actually the problem, keeping ourselves from the very things that we say we want. Strange as it may seem, we often work against our own wishes through the unwillingness to have what we say we desire in life.
Oh.
For example, let's say you are seeking more meaningful friendships, but you know that to have this would require you to extend yourself in new ways. And you've been hesitant to compromise your personal time and space. And because of this, you're not attracting new connections. To answer this question requires some honest and perceptive self-analysis. Consider the things that you wish for. Notice what you might be doing or thinking that could be keeping you from manifesting these desires. Analyze what this tells you about yourself at this time, and if it indicates a misalignment with your chosen values. And values was an earlier chapter where you explore that. Think of how you could practice greater willingness, even if you don't have a clear sense of the actions you need to take. And willingness is also a chapter in the book, and it's one of my favorite kind of themes, because sometimes we don't totally know what we need to change or how to do it. Maybe we get clarity on what we need to change, but we don't know how. And so just saying to the universe, I'm willing to see how this can unfold. I'm willing to do what needs to be done when I have a clear idea of what that is. So that's sort of a first step of moving into action, is being willing, or checking to see if you're not really willing.
Right. And I love the way you talked about, there's really no kind of rhyme or reason to how you go about the questions in the book. Is there like a recommendation? I mean, is it like,
And I'd say use it how it feels right for you. So you can look through they're all listed in the table of contents, and you can look through in themes. So there's 12 themes with 9 questions per theme. And so you might see one theme that really jumps out at you. And you're going to dig into those. Or you might just want to leave it on the coffee table as kind of an interesting conversation piece, and randomly, and say to your buddy who's sitting there, well, how would you answer this? And so it really will kind of ignite some interesting conversations. But I think it's just going to depend on the person. I mean, I think some people will use this to journal with, and kind of take one question a week, or, with 12 themes. You could do one theme per month for a year.
Huh.
So yeah, there's lots of different ways. And it actually would be a fantastic book for book clubs. It's almost like a book club in itself because
That's a great idea.
the questions are all kind of set there for you. And so it creates immediate discussion points. We actually, sounds true, actually, we created a book club guide, and that's available to download free on my website. So I'm sure you'll have that link available to people.
I will be sure to share your website in the chat box here in a second.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I kind of love that. There's no wrong way to do it, right?
No, definitely not.
So kind of as we keep talking about the book, what's your favorite question in there?
Oh gosh, I get asked this a lot because I'm the questions lady, and so people always.
Is there one we should all be aware of? Is there one that might, you might need to have a little cry after? Is there?
Well, I'll tell you the one that I talk about that I hated for a long time, actually, which is, what am I supposed to learn from this?
Oh, no.
There's this thing, there is a whole chapter on accountability, and I part of introspection is starting to take accountability for whatever's happening in our lives. And, there's so much blame happening in the world. There's so much finger pointing all across the board, right? And it's not helpful. It's certainly not helpful if we're trying to make positive change in our own lives. We have got to just own it, and whatever the it is in our world. And we have to own our own experience. We really have to own our own experience. We have to own our own reactions. And so this sense of accountability, and I've lost track of the question. Oh, I was going to tell you the one I
favorite question.
No, I was telling you the one I don't like, which is,
okay, right.
which is, what am I supposed to learn from this? Because that's the one that puts us into accountability. It's like this circumstance is here for my spiritual evolution.
It's like that's the introspection for the introspective activity,
If I get the message, if I get the lesson. And so even the hard things, even the traumatic things, the really, really tough stuff that human beings go through is here for our spiritual evolution. And we have got to make friends with that question. So that might be both my most hated and most favorite question. But
I guess it's up to the reader at that point.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think I talk about wanting to just slam it shut at a certain point when I was working with that question.
Well, what do you love most of, or what do you love about the questions in general?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've always been a question asker ever since I was a little kid, and most little kids are. I'll say that most little kids are extremely curious, and they're big question askers. I think parents sometimes can be uncomfortable with that because they feel like they need to know the answers. And actually we don't. And one of the chapters in the book is about knowing. And so I always like to assure people that you don't need to know the answers to all these 108 questions. This is not a quiz, and there's no gold star when you read the book. It's really not about that. What I love about questions is it just keeps us engaged with life. It keeps us curious. It keeps us alive in our minds and in our hearts, and willing to grow. And that's what kids are doing. They're in this world, and they're just in wonder about everything. And so we don't have to have all the answers, but we just have to keep going in the exploration of things. And my son, my sweet son, has forever, all his teachers would say he was always the kid with his hand up, asking questions. And so I think he must have gotten the question gene from me.
Yeah, that must have been you too, right? Always, that's what you said. Oh, that's fun. Kids do. They ask so many questions, and right, it's definitely kind of fake. So I know I kind of touched on this, but I just wanted, to provide you space to elaborate if you wanted to. What inspired you to write Spark Change? You talked about the work and, but what really drove it home for you?
Well, I think, with the world situation that we're in right now, what I'm going to answer the question. I'm going to answer a slightly different question, Jamie, which I'm going to try to answer what I hope this book will bring readers, particularly given the current times. And that is partially why I wrote it. I mean,
right.
I spoke about kind of how it came to be, how the idea came to me, but really my intention, my hope for this book is that it will inspire people. You know, this is a time where we're poised on the brink of so much change, and we can either go in a really positive direction or a really negative one, and it's up to every one of us. And I believe that the evolution of consciousness is what is going to make the greatest impact towards positive change, and that happens in the individuals. So we can't create systemic change in the ways in which we need to in our culture if we're operating at a consciousness of the past. We have to bring our consciousness level up several notches to a more spiritual and more unified place where we recognize that we are one human family, and that what each one of us chooses on a daily basis affects everyone, and vice versa. And so we've got to start working collectively towards the good. And so this raising of consciousness is what I hope comes from this book. And that might be a lofty goal, but in many ways it's not, because it happens one individual at a time. And so as each individual picks up these questions and works on them and thinks about them and goes, you know, how can I live more lovingly? Or how can I be more thoughtful of others? Or how can I live more in alignment with my values? Or I don't know that those are exact questions that are in the book, but I know they're close to ones that are in there. They're definitely thematic. Not only will the reader who is working with that material become happier in and of themselves and in their own lives, but they will start to make an impact on the society, the communities in which they're engaging, their work communities, their home communities, their social communities. And so, you know, it's really just about taking everything up to a higher and better level of awareness.
Wow. You know, it's really interesting because now I think about it, it's like this book will help you spark change within you, but then it's like you said, it's kind of like a snowball effect. It can help spark change around you. And I think that's really beautiful. That was kind of the last topic I wanted to chat about, was the relation to COVID-19 with this. I assume when you were putting it together, you had no idea about COVID-19, right?
Right. It wasn't even on the map. But where talking about inner change and outer change is that we can't move into action when we're in a misaligned place in ourselves, when we're not peaceful, when we're not clear, when we're not calm. And, oh, there's your kitty. When we don't have our highest values, clear in our minds, it's very hard to move into action in an effective way. We will move into action very reactively, very acrimoniously sometimes, and we just become more part of the problem than part of the solution. So I do feel that not only is this going to help people make the personal changes that they need to make, but it's also going to help them prepare for moving into outer action in the ways that are meaningful to them in a much more strategic and balanced way. And that's certainly my hope, because we don't need any more reactivity in the world.
Oh, I love it. And I really can't wait to get my hands on this book. It's now that the big pub houses, they're not doing advanced reader copies. It's like, oh, well, I guess I'll wait for it to actually come out.
Well, it's only a few days now. So
I know, thank goodness. Yeah. And so kind of before we open up to the, questions from the audience, what's next for Jennie Lee? What should we be on the lookout? Anything coming up that, we should share up? Any reading study groups? How do we stay interacting with you?
Well, please get on my newsletter list because I am going to be rolling out some programs related to Spark Change this fall. It's too early really to say what those are going to be. They're still in the works, but there will be ways in which people can interact more personally with me, potentially some group coaching kind of opportunities and some deeper dives into the self-reflection process on an ongoing basis. Not necessarily as a book club, but in a more interactive way with me. So do hop on my website, get on my newsletter list so you'll get notifications of that. Also working on just some courses that people will be able to do online. And I'm also available for private coaching. So
right.
I was looking forward to connecting with new people who are ready to dig in and do the personal work at that deep level. There was something else I was going to say. Now it's gone out of my head. So totally open to questions.
Yeah, we've got questions for you if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Great. Okay, so let's start off with Nancy's question. She would like to hear a question or two from the book and possibly some elaboration, but maybe just a taste of a few questions and
sure.
Yeah.
So I read one, am I willing to have what I say I want? Right. I'll do another like little divination and see what comes up.
Perfect.
All right, here's question number 65 is, what am I curious about?
Ooh.
And I'll say that, where that resonates in the current climate is that many people are starting to look at potentially new job opportunities. They're having to pivot into online ways of working. Maybe they're just deciding that now is the time to really make a change in their careers. Like maybe they've lost their jobs and they're being forced into that. So asking that question, what am I curious about, is very creative, inspiring. And so I'll just read the first paragraph of the explanation, which is, curiosity is one of our greatest guides to finding our next inspiration. It invigorates us by opening the door to new information and possibility. Allow glimmers of interest you hold about a subject, a place, or an activity to lead you into new worlds. There is certainly something that you wonder about. And so that's a fun one. All right, I'll do one more and then we'll see about the question maybe. So, okay.
Because some of them aren't as static over lifetime too, it's like.
Yeah, definitely. It's not just a one-time thing. So this is a book you can return to lots of times.
Right.
Okay, so have I made unhappiness a habit?
Ooh.
Humans are really good at kind of grousing and moaning and complaining and, pointing out all the problems. And it's easy to kind of stay in that unhappiness habit. But no one can make you happy if you choose to be unhappy. And no one can
said.
All right, we'll just leave it at that then.
All right.
There's a whole other explanation to that question, but
amen. All right, our next question is from an anonymous attendee who's wondering, how important do you think visualization is to spark change?
I think it is very important. Much like the very well-known law of attraction kind of teachings, visualization is a way of moving energy. And in the yogic teachings, which my background is in yoga philosophy and spiritual psychology, and visualization is huge. How we move energy in our bodies and how we move it not only in our bodies for our own health and well-being, but then how we move it out of our minds and bodies into the world, into manifestation. So I think visualization is huge. It's not something I go into a lot in the book, but it is something that I practice personally on a daily basis in my meditation practice. I do, there's a visualization technique that I do. So I'm a huge believer in that. And I would say, in addition to visualization, we really need to put ourselves into that feeling state of not only mentally seeing what it is that we want to come to fruition, but also feeling it. Feeling what it's going to be like when we have made that change, and we are just so much happier. So those are two things that are really important for sure. Thanks for that question.
Yeah, good answers. Okay, our next question is from Juliet. Juliet is a mom of teenagers and always gets eye rolls if she brings up meditation and yoga. Do you have suggestions for bringing questions like these into family conversation without scaring them off?
My teen has turned to 21 and he rolled his eyes too. He grew up with a meditation teacher, so you can only imagine how sick he was of hearing about it. And I got many eye rolls, but he now meditates. So on a daily basis, and that was of his own choosing. So there's always hope, and I think you just have to plant the seeds and keep hoping that they will find their way to that practice later on. But questions are great, and what's particular about these questions is they're all open-ended. There's no way for anybody to answer these with a yes or no answer. So with teenagers particularly, we're always looking for how we can get them into conversation and how we can draw a little more information out of them. So I think this is a fantastic book. I can actually hold it up here for you. It's hardback, and it's a little book. It's a 5x7, and like I said, there's one question per page. So and then there's a short explanation. So it would be a really easy thing to have on the table, to throw out at dinner and just see what everybody thinks about something. So yeah, good luck.
Thought-provoking, yeah, right? It's like, whoo, careful which question you get.
Yeah.
Okay, Benjamin is wondering, questions are fine and helpful to understand life and what it brings us. Your questions, because they are asked of ourselves, avoid the pitfall of questions that are asked of others, thereby allowing us not to really look at ourselves. Flacco.
I'm not totally clear.
Questions are fine.
On the question in that.
Well, I think he's saying your questions avoid the pitfalls of questions that are asked of others. Thereby, Benjamin, if you want to go ahead and submit something else to elaborate, we'll touch on it. But
there might be a little clarification on that one, but
okay. Let's go to the next one.
Sorry.
Can you speak more to what yoga therapy with your clients looks like? Is there a physical aspect to it, or is it more talk-based?
Yeah.
Great question.
It depends on the person and what they're going through. There is usually some physicality to it, and there is usually some talk. There's always talk to it. So I need to understand someone's history, what they're going through in their life, what challenges they're facing, and how that's affecting them physically. So there's always a physical component in terms of practice, but that's going to depend in scope on what the presenting challenge that someone's coming to that work with. So let's just take depression, for instance. It's a real broad category, but it's a common one. So someone is feeling a sense of depression, they're stuck in their life. We're definitely gonna do some breath work to help move energy. We're probably gonna do some movement too, but it's gonna be gentle at first. Because I need to meet someone where they are. And if someone is depressed, they don't usually have high energy. They're not going to want to go into a power vinyasa class. So we're not going to do, 108 sun salutations. We're going to start slow. We're going to start to move the body gently. We're going to see how that feels and what it brings up, and then we're going to dialogue about it. So it's a bit of a back and forth between physical practices and physical encompassing also breath practice and dialogue, and continuing to kind of peel the layers back for someone and what they're working on.
That's great. Can you discuss your writing process with us a little bit?
Sure. Often an idea will start for me very randomly, and I make a lot of notes on my phone, just almost like a dumping ground. I will usually have a Word doc on my computer and a note on my phone, and it's like just be making ideas, and that'll usually go for several months before I start to feel something coming into coagulation, if you will, and see if I actually have enough material to construct a book around. And then it's a process of I'm a big believer in not having a blank page, so I'm not going to sit and stare at the computer screen for any length of time. I'm just going to put some words on the paper, even if it's junk, and most of the times it is junk at first, but it's kind of just a brain dump. I'm a good editor, so, and I've learned, I come out of a journalism background, so I've learned to be very cutthroat in my editing. So I'll just brain dump, we get a lot of stuff on the page, and then start to go back and edit and edit and edit. And in that editing process, a lot of clarification happens and a lot of rearranging happens. But having written nonfiction my whole life, I will usually sit with an idea for several months before, you know, again, just kind of making those quick jotty notes before I sit down to try to write. And by the time I get to the writing, there's enough material there that I don't have a blank page. Nobody likes a blank page.
Oh, no, that's a really awesome writing practice. And I forgot to mention, I read Breathing Love, Meditation Action. I loved it. And to everyone, I did put it in the chat box, a link for that. Just wanted to let you know. So our last question here is, what do you do when you want to make a change, like move across the country, but well-meaning relatives or friends tell you that you are making a mistake and try to talk you out of it?
I can totally relate to that question.
Yeah.
I had dear friends, I had family members, I had partners tell me I was making a mistake. I had people in the place that I was moving to tell me not to come. It was too hard to move to Hawaii. You'll never make it. It's too expensive. Da, 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 all these things. You know, everybody sending out the negatives. But I knew I was clear. And I believe if you're clear, then it's just about being courageous and tuning those voices out. I mean, you can be kind about that, and you can be, you know, recognize that there's probably in that, there's a lot of love for you. They're wanting what's best for you. They're not wanting you to fall on your face, and or maybe they're just going to miss you. And I know there was a lot of that with people who were counseling me not to make the moves that I've made, but I have not regretted the moves that I've made. They have not been easy. They've taken a time to reestablish myself. But when I get clear about something, nothing's going to stop me. In fact, there's a shirt, you guys have probably seen it, it says, underestimate me. That'll be fun. I got to get one of those t-shirts because I think when you get clear and you know that something's right for you, you just got to go for it and tell people that you understand that they're looking out for your best interest, but you got to do this for yourself, and you hope that they'll support you.
And that's, you know, essentially what this book of provocative questions will help you do, right? Is establish clarity.
Yes.
It's the whole package.
Yes.
Well, this has been a fantastic event. I really appreciate you coming and joining us this evening. I know your book isn't even out yet. And, you know, for all of those of you here, I did put in a 10% discount code when you pre-order through Copperfield. That's still valid even after it pubs for the next week. And, you know, I just really enjoyed chatting with you, and hope everyone did as well. Before I give Jenny the last little goodbye, I just want to let everyone know that I will be sending a follow-up email that will include a link to this recording. It will include links to purchase Jenny's new book as well as her old titles, and will include discount coupon information. So any last thoughts with us before we wrap it up, Jenny?
Well, can we put in there as well the book club guide that's a free download for people? So we'll send that link to you as well.
If you get that to me in email, we'll include that as well.
Cool. Great. Cool. I do hope people will book club. And I'll say that I love zooming in to book clubs. So if you've got an active book club and you're using Spark Change, I would love to hop in sometime. You can email me and set up a time for me to hop in and say hi to your club and answer.
That's amazing. We'll have to work that out. Thanks so much.
I love that. Yeah, it's super fun. But yeah, I just want to leave on an encouraging note to everybody. It really is possible no matter where you are in your life. I've been in some pretty dark places in my life, and I know what it is to go through a process of change. I hope that this book will be inspiring to you. I believe that it will. I worked hard to make it so. And I encourage you to be courageous and go for your dreams. And it's never too late, and that you can do it.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Of course, everyone have a great evening, and we'll see you all back soon. Bye.
Bye.